Make sure you tip the doorman on the way out.
All right, well, thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate you keeping. Oh, one second.
We're not hearing you very much over the speaker.
How's this? All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. My name is Isabel Friedman. I work at the Natural Resources Defense Council as an environmental health advocate, and I'm also a member of Northwestern Energy's Low Income Stakeholder Policy Group.
I'm Matt Horton. I work at the HRDC here in town doing energy assistance, help connecting people to LIHEAP, Energy Share, if you know those acronyms. And I'm also a member of the Urban Parks and Forestry Board here in town. And most importantly, I'm a concerned citizen.
Yeah, and I'm on the Sustainability Board. Thank you, Matt, for talking about that. And we will be giving you guys some ideas to come past our boards very shortly. But before we get started with the local impacts of data centers, hey, Rosie, if you don't mind figuring out how to turn on the chat, just so we don't So before we get started on the local impacts of data centers, I just want to make sure that we give a little bit of background so that everyone knows what a data center is, why they're coming here, and most importantly, how they fit into this broader context of where tech plays a role in our political landscape. So data centers are essentially buildings full of computers and the infrastructure required to run them. And you'll hear this being referred to as a room full of servers. No need to get technical, everyone here. But essentially, right now, we see data centers that are coming online being primarily used to run and train artificial intelligence models, and these are called hyperscalers. And as we see, these tech companies have poured trillions of dollars into artificial intelligence, and to do that, they are now saying, we need to get these data centers on the ground as fast as possible. And at this point, given the level of political influence they have, the amount of capital they have, the only thing that's been standing in their way has been public resistance from communities just like ours and other communities across the country. And I think it's important to ground this in what we all know and experience artificial intelligence to be in our lives, because I think we can talk about data centers as this big facility and just another big infrastructure project that's coming into our community. But we need to also connect the dots of who the players are that are building these data centers, the Googles, the Metas, the Microsofts, and what they're using them for. And these artificial intelligence models are being used for surveillance, and they're being used to displace workers from jobs, and they're being used to hook us all onto our phones on social media. So I think we're all very familiar with how the technologies play a role in our lives, but we all kind of come to this from a different perspective and experience of why it's really concerning to us. So I'll pass it over to Matt to get us started.
Yeah, so people have a lot of different reasons to be concerned about these things, us regular people who are going to be impacted by this. And these are some of the main realms, I guess, that data centers have influenced people across the country in places where they've already been built, and ways that we expect them to affect us here in Montana. So you can see we're fighting on multiple fronts here, right? We have our grid and our energy bills, public health, water, and our economy. And I think as the night goes on, a theme that's going to become clear is that these things are all interconnected, right? So we're fighting on multiple fronts, but we need to try to get concessions from Northwestern and from these developers in all four of those areas and beyond, or otherwise there's going to be gaps and they're going to exploit those loopholes and take advantage of what they can. So energy systems, first of all, load growth. Right now, our grid does not have the infrastructure to really handle the really boosted up energy production that these data centers would require. So we're talking multiple megawatts more than what we already produce. There's the specific numbers later that I can't remember off the top of my head. But the estimates for the amount that the 3 required data centers of energy that they would require is many times over what we already produce and use in Montana just for like residential consumer stuff. And so there's a lot of questions and lack of transparency that comes with that, right? Like, is the grid going to be able to handle this excess load? Maybe, maybe not, probably not, right? And if we need to build more grid infrastructure to handle that load, who is going to pay for it? So these are all good questions, and that ties in with number 2, energy affordability. So, you know, when Northwestern does these big infrastructure projects, they, in the past, have handed that down by raising rates on consumers. They've skirted around the PSC to do so before, more than once. So, you know, even though they're supposed to be playing by the rules, they don't always do that. And I trust that they would skirt around the rules again if they wanted to. So they've already publicly stated in this weird kind of cryptic comment, I guess, that everyone's gonna share the load, right? We're gonna bring investment and prosperity to Montana, but we all have to share the burden. Something along those lines. I think they've kind of tried to walk that back recently. I went to a meeting not too long ago on their IRP, Integrated Resource Plan. And they mentioned things along the lines of like large load tariffs, which is a step in the right direction, but again, not enough because we are fighting on multiple fronts, and that's where we reach climate. So Northwestern has made investments in the Yellowstone County Generating Station, which is natural gas powered. Also Colstrip coal mine that they are trying to keep alive into the future. And so I feel like, you know, they're just making these bad investments, and then these AI data centers are kind of their justification for paying off those and bailing themselves out almost. So they have these AI data centers, they can raise rates, they have a justification to, you know, keep burning coal, burning gas, and obviously it's going to affect our climate in a negative way as well. But they've stated they're not interested in moving over to renewables because it's too expensive for them.
So I got the public health. So on the public health front, I think once again, thank you, Matt. We're fighting on a million fronts, and I think we kind of are seeing data centers on top of the impacts that we already have here in Montana. We have polluted water sources, we have polluted air, we already have ecosystems and communities that are dealing with higher levels of noise than they ever have. And unsurprisingly, data centers don't make our lives any better on these fronts. And on the air pollution piece, I think relatively speaking, Montana is lucky because we still have some amount of clean air in our beautiful Bozeman and the rest of our state. But in communities that are at the front line of data center development already, we are seeing a huge spike in rates of mortality, of hospitalizations, of cancers, specifically from the backup power generation used on site. That's often diesel power, if not always diesel generators. Data centers are also using gas turbines on site for primary power. And this is relating to the grid point where data centers right now are not at a loss for money, but they're at a loss of time. And they're trying to build as quickly as possible. And getting interconnected to a grid can often take 5 to 7 years. So instead they're planning on-site gas turbines right in the middle of a community, which they're gonna run 24/7 for primary power. And a phenomenal study came out in the last few months, and it quantified the impact of data centers over the next decade, and it found $20 billion in public health costs alone from data centers by 2028. And what this means is just higher rates of hospitalization, more fatalities, more just general costs borne by all of us and impacted community members. And on the noise pollution front, just outside of Missoula, they are quite familiar with this because a few years ago there was a crypto mine that was put there, and it was actually shut down because of community concerns over noise pollution. Because a lot of these facilities, because of the cooling, because of the power that they run, they have They have high levels of noise emitted that then can impact local communities, wildlife, etc. And the next of the fronts to talk about is impacts to our water resources. Water resource, I feel like in the West and also in Montana, feels like a nonpartisan issue because it's something that all of us need to survive. Agricultural producers need to make an income and to produce products for the rest of us. So I think the water point has really been a salient piece bringing people together on this issue. And in terms of water, there is a single data center in Iowa that uses 2.8 million gallons of water a day. This is one out of the thousands of data centers that you have in the country. And this is particularly concerning in the West, where we are in the worst drought in 1,200 years. We're all very acutely aware of the preciousness of water and also how important it is for us to be thoughtfully planning for the future. And second piece of this is around water pollution, and this is a little bit less research because ultimately a lot of this information isn't currently required to be reported by the federal government. A lot of the pollution discharge permits have been weakened just during this administration, so we don't fully know what water pollution looks like from these data centers. What we do know is that because of the way that they run water through their systems and the kinds of chemicals that are used at these plants, we know that when they discharge them, depending on how they treat it, there is a really high likelihood for them to be polluting our waterways. And in fact, in Wyoming, they have just cited and approved what will be the biggest data center in the country by a mile. And they are sited right above the Ogallala Aquifer. And as of now, they're planning to discharge their water directly back down into the aquifer. And this aquifer happens to give water to 8 of the states in the West, all the way going down to Texas in the South. So kind of an important water source for all of us. And then similarly to what Matt brought up about energy affordability, once again, we haven't been able to actually research this yet because it's really unclear how data centers are playing in. Also just because water utilities are regulated in a very different way than energy utilities are. I believe we only have a few dozen energy utilities in the country. We have 50,000 water utilities. So figuring out the piecemeal of how data centers are impacting them is a lot harder to find out. But presumably, I think there's communities around the country pretty concerned about if data centers are using so much water and we need new water resources or we need to build additional conveyance or treatment facilities, this could then put additional costs on consumers, raising water utility rates for existing customers.
Sure. And then impacts to the local economies. So in Butte, in the conversations I've had up there, the big draw obviously is that these data centers are going to create jobs, they're going to create investment, right? And that's kind of why you'll see like labor unions and certain county commissioners up in Butte be really gung-ho about bringing these things in. But we've seen across the country that this is actually ends up being kind of a farce a lot of the time. So I lived in Virginia for a while where they were really, really excited about bringing in data centers and kind of just opened the floodgates to let them in, no pun intended. And now they're trying to walk back a lot of those things with regulation because they're realizing that they overextended themselves and these things aren't bringing the types of economic opportunities that they promised. So one of the 3 big developments in the state right now, the SABE project up in Butte. I was talking to a person up there who's on the ad hoc committee that they have that like studies the effects basically of what it would do to their community. And they anticipate that project to create just 200 full-time jobs, which is like, 200 people putting food on the table. You can't argue with that, it's a good thing, right? But I think when you're thinking about the costs and what it would cost the rest of the state, 200 full-time jobs is not enough for what we would have to give up. We'll have time for questions at the end.
I just went, could you clarify what that project is in Butte, please? I'm sorry, I missed that.
Saby is the name of the developer, and I would have to look up where exactly it is. I don't really know the lay of the land up
Well, that's
there.
all right. That
But
takes-
yeah,
Thank
I'll
you.
get back to you on that. And then.
I just have one thing to add on the
Okay.
jobs front. I think importantly, outside of the permanent jobs, there's also a lot of the union concern in Montana and also generally has been specifically around temporary construction jobs. And once again, fundamentally a great thing to bring jobs to the state. However, the challenge that we're seeing, and this has been corroborated by examples in a lot of other states, these data centers are hiring the same folks and they're bringing them from site to site to site. So they're not only not hiring union labor and local union labor, they're hiring people from out of state to fill these temporary jobs. So there's just a big ecosystem of misinformation of what we're being sold and the actual benefits that are being felt by the communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the estimate is like between 500 to 600 construction jobs, which again lasts like a year or so. I don't know how fast. I don't know how long it takes to build a data center actually. I'm sure they like to do it quickly, but yeah. In conversations that I've had also, they were like, oh, the union laborers, they were promised that they're gonna get, hired to do these jobs. And I was like, well, is that in writing? And they were like, no. So again, if it's not in writing, don't buy it. And then local tax revenue is another one. So there was a House bill passed here in Montana in the last legislative session that lowered rates. And again, I'm blanking on the House number bill that was, but I can look that up.
It was 46, but I could be wrong. I think
I
it
think
was,
242 or something.
oh, I don't know.
There was a 4 in there somewhere, right?
Someone fact check us.
Someone will know out there, and we'll get your opinion on that later. But it kept tax rates really low for these big, generation projects, these big energy generation projects, and that just ties in again with the state trying to attract these things in and wanting to be an open door for them. But we see in other states that they end up regretting that a lot of the time. So something to keep in mind.
And one specific example on the tax revenue, so 36 states have tax incentives for data centers to come here. We don't give tax incentives to every industry that asks, but we seem to love the tech industry notably. And in Oregon specifically, they have seen a drastic decrease in the funding for their local schools explicitly because of tax incentives that have, I believe they started in the last few years. And there was a report that came out, I want to say in the last month, from Good Jobs First, and they drew an explicit link between loss of tax revenue from data centers and the loss of school funding. So it is both I think this is an example of where we're talking about, yes, local impacts to our water and air and to our energy grid, and also impacts on things that have nothing to do with data centers. And that kind of is that's the reason why we're all here today, it's not just about air and water, it's about everything that touches our lives.
It was House Bill 424, by the way. I looked it up. I knew there was a 4 in there. Okay. So these are the 3 projects, the ominous projects that I've been referencing. And Saby is the first one that we'll talk about. So these 2 are both in Butte, Silver County. And a lot of those are they're being talked about at the county level government rather than like the city level. I think just mainly because the land is not in town, it's more out of town. But again, I need to look that up. They just voted to extend by 6 months a option to purchase 600 acres of land in the county for Saby to build that first project. And that's been a situation, again, where transparency's come into play because they haven't released any renderings or any plans of how they would actually lay out their data center and what would actually be going on that land. For the amount of energy that one would generate, 600 acres is kind of a lot from what I've been told. So there's a lot up in the air about why do they need that much land? Why do they want that much land? and we're just not getting answers on it from Savvy, the developing company, or Northwestern Energy. Atlas is a smaller one that actually it already exists in Butte-Silver County. It's like a crypto center right now, I think. But they are trying to increase their capacity, increase their generation. So that's another one where they're trying to develop it more and build it out. And the problem that's going to come with that one is, since it's a smaller scale one right now, they can use air coolers on it, which has its own set of problems. But with the amount that they want to scale it up, they would have to transition over to water cooling, which again, here in the dry, arid West, that's going to be a big issue if we're using up all that water. So that's kind of the main concern with that one. And then Quantica is the big one, out in Broadview, so that's in Yellowstone County, out near Billings. And I think that one's on a few thousand acres, and they're trying to generate up to a gigawatt, I think, right? Is giga bigger than mega?
750.
Okay. Yeah, that one's the biggest one. And they already own land out there, so again, it's kind of like, no one's trying to knock on their door and see what they're planning and what they're doing. But yeah, and our little note down here is that these data centers combined would produce 1,400 megawatts of energy, which is nearly double, again, what we're doing right now. So again, I just want to reiterate the stress that's going to put on our grid. When I taught circuits to my middle school students, they would try to tape a bunch of batteries together, and it would always make the light bulb go out. So, yeah.
Cool. So outside of all of the concerns that we've already mentioned, I think there's a part of this that cuts a little bit deeper and really touches on the public involvement in all of this. And I would say this is both something that is related to data centers and generally the way that tech companies tend to operate. The majority of data center proposals in the US are being done through NDAs, and this makes it very difficult for the public to find information. It also makes it very difficult to litigate on a facility. And in Montana specifically, we know that Northwestern Energy has neither disclosed where this additional power is coming from. They've alluded that it'll end up in the postponement of the closing of Colstrip, as well as increased power from the Yellowstone generating station, but they also haven't talked about who's going to pay for it. And from where I stand, I think the transparency piece is really fundamental to being able to do anything about data centers, because if we don't know what's going on at these facilities, there's no way for us to regulate them. There's no way for us to be actively involved community members who care about what goes on where we live. And this isn't novel, and it's not specific to Montana. This is how data centers play, and this is how they push up against the community power that tends to rise anytime this information becomes public. And we've given a lot of depressing information tonight. It seems like a lot of times when we bring people together and talk about these really heavy issues that are plaguing all of us, I think it's really important to end on somewhat of a positive note and cite more than $64 billion of data center projects have been delayed, and that has included one here in Montana. Since the last time we gave this presentation, we've had 4 data centers proposals, and now we only have 3, and that is a huge result of the amount of community pressure and all of the general discourse that has happened across the state. And when I Googled photos to put on this slide, there are hundreds of pictures of protests of people in their city halls and city councils, and people like this from all across the political spectrum who are coming together on this issue because they see a concern. And ultimately, I think there's a feeling of being slighted by data centers trying to do this behind closed doors and without our consent and without bringing any sort of value to our communities. So I just wanted to, I'm sorry there's a little bar in front of this, but we've started putting together a list of demand, so to speak, because I think there's somewhat of a tension of data centers are already being developed. There's, I don't want to say data centers are inevitable because they're not at all, but there will be some development of data centers, and what I think we can do is say data centers can only come to town on our terms, and they can come to town on terms that benefit all of us and that actually bring tangible value to our community financially and ensure that they're not environmentally overburdening our state or overburdening our grid. So these are a very initial list that we put together of kind of best guidance frameworks for data center development, and it talks about, I can quickly run through these. It ensures that rates don't rise for consumers and does so by making data centers pay their way, pay for your new energy, pay for the new infrastructure required, ensure that it's not us consumers getting burdened with those costs. Make sure that data centers contract with local union labor, and this is, it seems like such an obvious one, just given that we have an ample number of, sorry about that.
Thanks for that, though.
Cool. It seems like such an obvious one, but very few data centers are using these practices. And then finally, relying on clean power in Montana, that would mean not using coal, not using natural gas, and this is both on-site and off-site, and for primary power as well as backup power in the case of grid emergencies. Also, to the transparency piece, making sure that data centers disclose all of the relevant information. And this means disclosing it before construction, before they apply for permits, and then continuously through the process of development and operation. And then once again, another one that should be common sense, but it doesn't happen in practice, is obtaining all of the required air and water permits. And we are already seeing a diluting of EPA, Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act permits, but it is so important for data centers to go through the procedures that we already have in place, alongside with procedures that advocates will continue to put in place to regulate these facilities. And we want to make sure that data centers use most efficient technology to minimize water use. This is also true for air and water pollution, of using most up-to-date and best available control technologies. And then finally, just avoiding siting both near sensitive ecosystems and I think also near really vulnerable communities that already have super high levels of pollution, I've already dealt with decades of industry being there and leaving a mess for everyone else to clean up. So I'll leave the next slide to Matt, and then we'll jump into a discussion. And I would love to hear if there are other things that you guys think should be on this list, if there are other things that concern you. So just get the gears turning.
Yeah, so I guess one thing I would add to that last slide is, you don't have to go back, but avoid sensitive ecosystems. Well, our whole state is kind of a sensitive ecosystem too. I'm a birder. If my snow goose migration gets messed up, I'm gonna be mad, okay? We're one of like 4 grassland, sorry, it's been a long day, prairie ecosystems that's like still relatively intact in the entire world, okay? So there's a lot at stake here. But yeah, a lot of our motivation in the organizing we've been doing and calling this meeting was, how can we in Bozeman form a coordinated response to these things, and what can we actually do? So that's where you all come in, and us too. And excuse me, just working to hold our public officials accountable. Okay, we elect them for a reason, whether we like it or not. And the main targets here are going to be the PSC, Public Service Commission, again, who's theoretically supposed to be the ones who regulate Northwestern, since they are a monopoly utility. It's the only option a lot of people have to get their energy, so they have this elected body in the state that is supposed to represent our interests. So if you live here in town, your PSC rep is a guy named Brad Molnar. You should get in touch with him. You can also get to their website to find your rep if you live elsewhere, or to find their emails or whatever. Public comments are a great way to do that. They meet on Tuesdays at weird times. Sometimes it's at like 9 in the morning, other times it's later in the day. I still haven't really figured out their meeting schedule, but I'm going to get to the bottom of it.
You can give comment virtually, so not all of us need to trek to Helena together, though.
Oh yeah, they're in Helena. Yeah, and one of the things we provided is on our fact sheet back there. If you want to take one, there's like a QR code, and that leads to like a template for just a general public comment that you can submit about data centers. If you want to add your own flair, I encourage you to do so because I'm not a writer. Also, city commissioners and the sustainability board. So Bozeman right now, we're not, there's no, there are no proposed, I'm gonna try that again.
Data centers in Bozeman.
There are no proposed projects here in Bozeman, but our city commission can still make their stand known. There are, there are petitions they can sign on to that other cities have done about, what they would or wouldn't allow Northwestern to do and what they would or wouldn't allow data centers to do. And then there's also those boards that Isabel and I are a part of. Sustainability board will probably cover more data center stuff than urban parks. I don't think Storyville's getting a data center anytime soon. If it is, let me know. And then reach out to your state and federal reps as well. So again, holding our reps accountable. The legislative session is not until next January. Our reps work for 1 month every 2 years, and they get a lot done in that time. In the meantime, though, they do have interim committees on like energy. They have one on water, so you can look up those. Also, we have a number of different reps that go to the state just here in Bozeman. So depending on where you live, what street you live on, you can go to the state government website and figure out who your reps are and how to contact them. And then again, get organized. So again, just coming to these things is so huge to know what's going on and knowing what other people are doing and how you can use your connections and your resources to engage. Or if you know people in Billings or Butte or Great Falls or wherever, and you think they might be interested, like you can give them a call and say, hey, have you heard about these data centers that are going to ruin your life? So all good things to be doing. Showing up's the first step.
Cool. So first of all, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you also for the people who piled in after. We really appreciate it. And I think the point of this was both to do a little bit of education, but then also really, we would love to hear why you're concerned about data centers, what concerns you the most, and how, I guess, the role that you think that you play in this whole ecosystem, and then also just any questions or comments that you all have. We're here to try to field them. If not, we will get you an answer. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. We can take any questions, comments, opinions. Absolutely welcome. Yes, please.
Pardon me. So what I understand is any infrastructure developments that Northwest Energy does, they automatically get 10% from the ratepayers to help pay off that infrastructure. So there's an incentivization to build big. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe so. And I think, part of this we saw, I think there's two things going on here. There's that, but then there's also the, as they bring on more customers to their grid, they're building out all of these other infrastructure projects like Colstrip, like Yellowstone Generating Station. And this is, it's really just like money that builds on itself, at least as I see it. You bring on the facilities, you then have an increased capacity on the grid to bring on future customers. And ultimately, if they're not the ones paying for the infrastructure and we are, then ultimately we're the losers in that game.
And the second, I've spent time around Broadview. Where are they getting the water?
Yeah.
I should mention we have KGBM here, our wonderful local radio. So I'm going to hand out the mic for questions and comments. They can also get in on the fun. So if you wouldn't mind repeating your question.
Broadview, where are they getting the water?
I would echo your where are they getting the water, because from what I've read, there is no disclosure on that. And that is an answer that you will get on virtually all data center facilities that you run up against. I have read far too many data center proposals across many dozens of states, and almost never do they disclose where they're getting the water from. Often all they'll disclose is their water utility. And so thank you for raising that. We agree with that question. And I think our kind of, this gets to the core of why we're all here, is demanding transparency.
I know in Butte too, there have been rumblings of pipelines, like obviously nothing in writing and nothing that's officially being planned, but rumblings of pipelines and like transporting the water from other parts of the state, which again is another costly infrastructure project, so hopefully it doesn't come to that. Thanks. I'm gonna get my steps in today. It's good. I'm sitting all day.
Are the data centers that are being built, are they, do they have customers that, like, I don't know the names of these companies? Do they have customers that we do know that they rent, they lease space? You know, is Google renting from these places? Is that how this works?
Yeah, so, and also I would flag that we have someone who works at MEIC here who is doing a lot of the advocacy in the rest of the state. So Nick, if you have any answers that we don't know of, interrupt us. That's why you're here. But I would add to that similarly, this is how it's working in a lot of states where you have these almost like shell companies that are the ones doing the data center development and they lease out the space. I will say, shortly after the project in Butte was proposed, there was a sign that went up on the freeway that said Palantir in all big letters. And that was in Butte at the same exit. So I wouldn't say that there's a correlation, but I wouldn't say that they're moving in silence either.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Just I think the projects that we're facing right now are still kind of early on too. And with like the lack of transparency we have with what's going on right now, potential suitors to lease the space is definitely a good thing to keep an eye on that I hadn't thought much about, but I don't know that we're there yet necessarily either.
Yeah, I have something to add to your draft list of things to demand. This would be that the ratepayers in Montana are not left with stranded assets. And there's a cautionary tale now out of Louisiana that Earth Justice is involved with. But this involves their big utility, their Energy. Energy signed a contract with Meta to build or to provide the electricity for 3 new data centers that were going to be really expensive, like our Yellowstone one. And the PSC there approved it. Supposedly they were getting a 15-year guarantee for Meta, but the deal is that Meta created a shell company within a shell company that had no assets and pretty much had the ability to walk away at any time, leading the taxpayers with stranded assets. I think there was nominally maybe a 4-year guarantee before they could walk away. But given the 30-year life of these facilities, that is the gas-fired facilities that would provide the electricity, that is the ratepayers there who are on the hook now if they walk away in 4 years for 26 years of basically a stranded asset. And you can see that happening in Montana with these 3 data centers doubling our capacity, going from 700 megawatts to 1,400 to provide for these new data centers. And technology changes or the company decides it doesn't want to do it anymore. I think Meta's attorneys are probably smarter than Northwestern Energy's. So I think we have to add that to the list.
Hey, Will, could you explain what a stranded asset is, please? I'm not sure.
Okay, well, it's just
that'd be helpful.
Yeah, well, it's just an asset that is not needed that you have to pay for.
Like a power plant.
Yeah, like a power plant. Yeah. Yeah. We wish we could strand that one, actually.
Yeah, it's not always a bad thing. But yeah, I think there's a lot of fears about like AI and the technology advancing so rapidly that it like replaces itself, right? We don't know what's going to come next, but it'll probably come soon. And that's a good point you bring up too, because I think, our list of demands is very, very rudimentary, where again, like one of our goals with this meeting today and some of our organizing going forward is to get those to be more specific, right? So like, how would you prevent those stranded assets, or like, what would be, the limits on those sort of things? So that's a really good point, and we have a lot of models to work off of in other states too.
Do you have anything to add to that?
First of all, thank you guys for doing this. This is great. In terms of I guess, the demands or requirements list, I'm glad to see we have a couple representatives from our state government here. Thank you guys for coming. I think you're thinking too small here. You know, I mean, if they're gonna come, we don't care if they come or not, right? And I think in general, the government's done a terrible job managing our communal assets that we have as a community here in Montana. Let's try and get them to do better. So, you know, they want to use the same amount of electricity as we're using now. They ought to pay for half of the electricity that they're using, reduce everybody's electric bill. They should pay us. We shouldn't be paying them. If they want to buy 1,000 acres to put in a data center, they should have to buy 5,000 acres somewhere else in Montana and rewild it. I mean, these are the kinds of demands that we should be making, not these piddly little things about like, oh, please don't hurt me. We should say, if you're gonna come, you're gonna pay us for the privilege of coming here, and you're gonna do something good for us. And I hope you agree.
And I would just say, on that point, what we know is that we're dealing with the wealthiest companies that have ever existed. And the one thing that these companies have is money. And we see in tons of states, when they reach community pushback, they try and just spend their way out of it. So that's where I think raising our demands and also ensuring that proportional to the level of impact that they're having here, and in fact higher than that, I think they need to be contributing. Just like usually you get a new restaurant in town and they go through all this construction, it's noisy, it's loud, everything. They provide a service to the community. I'm not sure of the service that data centers are providing to us. And I keep seeing this line that says that we can't eat data. And I think that we should all sit and grapple with that.
Yeah. This one's a little easier to handle. Thanks.
Thank you, and thanks for having this presentation this evening. I am a state representative. My name is Chris Pope, and I serve in the state senate right now. And I'm here to listen. But I want you all to know that I think, in agreement with the previous comment, that we need to be very proactive about the way we approach this. For example, in the spirit of what was just said, for example, what if on say a $200 billion project, I mean, we're talking about numbers that Montana's never seen before, or anywhere, pretty much. What if we put, $50 million or $75 million or $100 million into energy efficiency, starting with the lower end of income homeowners, to create capacity. So the conversation is always about let's go build. And I brought a bill for community solar that got through the House and the Senate, but the governor vetoed it. We'll bring it again. But we can build, and we need to build. And I think some of us may remember conversations nationally. Ezra Klein, is telling us to build. But in the vision that we have for our environment and the critters and for our people to be healthy and safe. And with that as a starting point, the easiest way, cheapest way to create another megawatt of capacity is to not use that megawatt. So we go into people's homes who want it, who volunteer, and we weatherize. And we take care of appliances, and we reduce their energy bills and create capacity if needed for the next project. It could be a data center, it could be, there are other, as we see our communities electrify, it's called beneficial electrification. And if you want to Google that, you spend a couple days getting into it, it's awesome. And the whole idea is that eventually we will be in an electric energy economy. I sit on the governor's task force, so, full disclosure here. It's not a terribly comfortable place to be because I'm hugely outnumbered, but not in the sense of the working group that so far had I'll talk offline with anyone here about that in more detail. It's important that we have good conversations going, and I'm not saying that that's gonna be the way it finishes, but so far so good. I also sit on ETIC, which is the Energy Technology Interim Committee. Again, anybody wants to talk about this offline, please. And that's it. I appreciate your having asked me to come here. The reason I'm mentioning it is because there is I call it a kung fu move, which is that someone's gonna come here and build massive plants. And for all the reasons, my starting point is one of extreme vigilance and concern to make sure that this can't not be done right. It has to be. So whatever that means, but what it means to me is consumers 100% cannot be impacted financially or otherwise. And we can bring a bill, and we'll bring bills to create, and I'll be quiet. And then to create the protections financially, that if there ever was something that was rate-based. So rate-based means that the utility brings the power generation onto the grid that we all use. And the data center in that scenario would use some of the power. And we would be at risk of paying for some of that or having cost shifting and whatnot. There's a new thing, please Google it, it's called Bring Your Own Generation, BYOG. Inside their campus, they have to do, and I'll be bringing a bill that says it has to be renewable. And please put solar and storage somewhere in the mix here, and energy efficiency, because we can be creating capacity without building massive plants, and need to. I could go on and on. Final comment. Natural gas plants, just for everybody's information, sitting across the table with someone having lunch or dinner. Natural gas plants have some real vulnerabilities in the moment right now. It takes 6 years to even get a natural gas component like a turbine, because everybody's doing it. So all of a sudden, it's very hard to get the power plant project put together physically to build it. So that's to say it's a 6-year time frame. Solar and storage can be built in 24 months, and it's probably going to be the price. Energy efficiency we can start doing tomorrow morning. There are ways to kung fu, take what doesn't feel right and turn it around. But we have to be hugely vigilant, and I will say that the SCR Public Service Commission, they're public servants, so I'm not gonna hit them over the head. But oh my gosh, they're not passing grade, even close. Okay, we'll leave it at that. We need vigilance. They are the folks to be vigilant. That will be another bill brought in January. We can't do anything until January. So I'll stop. Please ask me questions now or in the future. Find my phone number. I think everybody knows how to reach me. So please, and I really appreciate the conversation. It's going to be, data centers or not, we have huge issues in front of us about our electric grid, huge opportunities as well. So don't give up the fight. There are things we can do, and we're going to try and do those. And slowly but surely, I think, for energy independence and liberty and economics, some folks who might not start thinking about renewables and storage and batteries and energy efficiency are starting to come over to our side. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Senator. We appreciate it. And thank you for your work on this.
I take back my comment about your lack of work ethic. I had my jokes planned ahead of time. I didn't.
And I would just say, and I say this both personally and professionally, I think we look forward to working with your office on this, and also the allies who are concerned about this across all sides of the political spectrum, because last time we did this, we had Trump supporters in the room, and I think that there's a real need for data centers to remain a nonpartisan issue and to remain something that is common sense to all of us. So thank you.
Let me recognize Peter Strand, who's our representative in town as well. Peter stands tall on this subject. So please use us.
Absolutely.
And there's no office, by the way, it's just us, chickens in our cars. That's it. So anyway,
Great,
yeah.
thank you.
May I respond to one thing
Yes.
that you said? I was really struck by your comment. Okay, thank you.
I was really struck by your comment about risk, right? And it goes back to sort of what I was trying to express before, is that risk is worth money, right? If you're asking somebody to take on risk, there should be a return on that investment. And every Montanan is at risk no matter how good of a job you guys do, right? Every Montanan is at risk if they build one of these things. We need to be paid for that somehow. And that's what I'm hoping, and there's Peter back there too, thank you for coming. That's what I'm really hoping you guys can try and accomplish, is not just saying, well, we want the neutral here. We want to be compensated for our risk in some significant way.
I agree with that.
Thank you.
And that means up front.
Yes.
That means setting up the sideboards up front and so forth. So thank you.
Thoughts on, yeah, you have them? Sure, thanks, Mayor Young.
I listen to a lot of tech podcasts and get a lot of news that way, so I'm just relaying information without taking a stand here. The bigger picture, like at the federal levels and big levels, it is looked upon, why are these data centers being built, right? What's the big picture that's driving building these communities? And at some levels, there's definitely people that want to make a lot of money, but there's also, it's looked upon as a existential threat and a global security issue. Whether you believe it or not, that is the discussion, that the race for AI is, being looked upon as, the Manhattan Project in the 40s. And so a lot of people do look at it that way, and that, will kind of wipe out so many arguments right away. So I think it's just good to know about that discussion as well, to find out why there's so much motivation to do this and why there's so much federal support to do this.
And I would just add to that, I appreciate that, and it's absolutely a political conversation that's happening at the federal and state level. And I think another thing, and this is really where the public education and events like this and the work that other people are doing comes into play, that there is, I don't know what kind of risk you want to call it, but there is a level of existential risk that comes with Montanans dying from air pollution and us not having enough water to sustain our economy. I think there's just different kinds of risks that we're playing with, and this is where, when we're trying to play the long game, absolutely we need to think about whether it's a technological arms race with China or whatever it is, but I think we also need to focus on protecting the people that are neighbors right now and that we live next to and that we deeply care about because they're part of the fabric of the state. So I think it's a balancing act between those two, and I always get cautious about any of these grand arguments that kind of wipe everything else out, because it does seem to miss the finer grained point on how it's impacting us right now and not a speculative what will happen in the future. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just chime in since you mentioned the work that we've been doing.
You can plug the work you're doing.
Yeah, I work with Montana Environmental Information Center, mostly just listening here tonight, but we have been doing a lot of engagement on these issues. We've been hosting events. Thanks y'all for hosting this event tonight.
They've had hundreds of people turn out across their events across these states.
Yeah, and it's wild. We had an event in Broadview and over 100 people showed up for a town that's 150 people. So it's cool to see that people are really engaged and concerned, because this is a really big issue. And I just wanted to emphasize the point about the Public Service Commission. Their meetings these days are Tuesdays at 1:30 p.m. They changed them from the previous commission, but most of the time they didn't meet this week. Most of the time that's when they meet. And they're going to be really important in determining how and if these costs get passed on to the rest of us. Northwestern has been saying for many months that they're going to bring a large load tariff to the Public Service Commission. They're supposed to do it by the end of last year. They have not. And if you listen to their calls with investors, that's about the most transparent you'll hear them talk about anything, because they want to hype up all the energy we'll be selling to data centers. So their call the other day And if you recall, they said they're waiting to file that tariff until they've entered into an energy service agreement with one of these data centers. So they want to lock in that they're going to be able to serve these data centers, make a deal, potentially make a deal that we're going to be paying to subsidize that before they come and go to the Public Service Commission to say how that's all going to work. We've asked the Public Service Commission to move that process along, and that's ongoing. We've been trying to get more information about the letters of intent and other information, but we'll just plug again that the Public Service Commission is a really big part of this, and y'all should let them know that you care.
Thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments or opinions? Anything? Thank you, Matt, for being the runner today.
Born around. I'd like to say thanks again for having this forum. I was just kind of curious if anybody in Butte looked into using, I guess it's pretty low-grade waste heat, but they do run desalination plants, I think, with low-grade waste heat. So one possibility would be to try to clean up the Berkeley pit using some sort of waste heat power. I have no idea if that's technically feasible, but I would look to our leaders to maybe give some of these data centers a little bit of positive press and then try to solve the problem and not create just a new one.
Yeah, thank you for raising that. And I think that also gets to the point of right now, data centers that are being built in a myriad of ways. There's so much development happening on the cooling front, on the waste heat front, on the power generation front. And to your point about how long it takes to bring data centers online right now, they are starting to use ship engines because they can't get gas turbines in time and because they can't get interconnected to the grid. So there are a lot of unorthodox things happening at these data centers, and that's part of the transparency piece that's so important. It's also part of, I think, the research that is kind of on all of us to do of like, what is the best solution, and also ensuring that our state legislators are both incentivizing using the best technology, and then also like having a little bit of the stick too, because if they're gonna come and there's better technology and they're swimming in money, there isn't really an excuse left. So thank you for that point. Absolutely agree. And if we have any other questions, we'll take those. Otherwise, we are at time.
Yeah, we already kicked out pretty soon. If you have a quick comment or question, we could,
Are you showing
squeeze them a bit. They'll be all right. Just gonna plug the handouts
cool.
in the back, but that we'll do at the end. Anyone else? Anyone alive out there? No? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming, man. Like, this means a lot to us. We work very hard to organize these things, and it's good to see that people actually care about the stuff that we also care about. So on your way out, I mentioned our fact sheet, just kind of summarizing what we talked about here. And then it has that sample comment that you can send to the PSC or whoever would be relevant. I think that one's like addressed to the PSC, but again, put your own spin on it. We also have some other events coming up with our community partners. We have a teach-in with Students Against Genocide and Bozmean Tenants Union, which I can't get into all that right now because I'm going to talk forever about that. But MSU, there's AI research going on their campus that they are housing and subsidizing to an extent. I'm not the expert on it, but it's for surveillance that's used by like the IDF, the military, and ICE. So I can't talk about it, so you should go to their event on Sunday, the 22nd of February at 6 p.m. At the UCC Pilgrim Church, which I think is over kind of by the museum. And then the second one is on Saturday the 21st, so this Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's the Snowman protest. Yeah, does anyone want to summarize that? Sorry, this is new to me, so I don't really know what to say about it. Who brought these?
Sweet.
Do you want to plug it really quick?
I was just a messenger.
Oh.
Well,
Okay.
everyone go to the snowman protest. And there may be snowmen after today.
Protecting cold winters and summer water, so it seems relevant. Despite the weather today, the fact we had to wait till the end of February is a little concerning. So yeah.
Thank you guys so much, and we will be sticking around if you have any questions, comments. If you signed in on the QR code or wrote your name down, we will be happy to send this presentation, happy to follow up after this. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank